Welcome to Flying Upstream, the podcast where we uncover the choices, practices, and wisdom that defy mainstream conventions. I'm Kristen.
And I'm Louisa. And together we're here to illuminate the alternative paths that have shaped human experiences through the ages. In each episode, we'll examine ways to move beyond societal norms. We're passionate about how timeless wisdom and unique lifestyle choices can foster healthier, sustainable, and enriching lives.
Join us as we navigate, challenge, and celebrate the beauty and insight of walking the road less traveled. If you've ever felt like you're flying north for the winter while everyone else is flying south, you've found your flock.
Welcome back, free spirits. Welcome back to another episode of the Flying Upstream podcast. Today, on this episode, we have a discussion that affects us all. If you have ever felt like you are not meant to be living a conventional life, like there are things that are holding you back, this episode is going to be for you. So stay tuned.
Today on the show, we have an amazing author, entrepreneur, philosopher, environmentalist, and keen gardener, Adrian Emery. He's devoted his life to creating a new philosophy called LifeWorks, based on understanding the laws, principles, and codes that make life work easily, effortlessly, and successfully. He has developed a coaching modality called Tao Tuning, designed to assist others in finding their life purpose and attuned to the flow of their inner destiny and fate. To work with Adrian and learn more about what he does, you can check out his website at adrianemery.com. Welcome, Adrian, to Flying Upstream.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm really excited and look forward to an interesting conversation.
We are so excited to have you. And just based on your biography and what you do, can you tell us what Tao tuning means?
Yes, Dao means the way in ancient Chinese. And tuning, I use the word tuning because, as we all know with technology, fine-tuning our television to get a clear reception, or finding clear reception on a radio, or even in a show like this where we need to adjust our technology to get it. We all know how distracting and disturbing it is if you get pixelation or you get a lot of static. Then you can't really enjoy the data or the message or the information that's coming through, particularly if it's want to watch a show or streaming. Sometimes we all know it doesn't work. What I wanted to perfect was the ability to go within and get a really clear signal of what your own life was all about, so that you could attune you. And I believe that it's something that you need to physically and spiritually do to attune your life. Because if you're really clear, if you know where you're going and what you're doing, there's an ease, there's a grace, and there's a surety that comes about you. But when you don't really know, say even thinking of making a decision, when you're confused, then a lot of agitation and anxiety comes from that not knowing. So for me, Tao tuning is a personal process of spiritual attunement, but you're attuning to your inner Tao. You're not attuning to a Bible or the commandments or a religion or anything that is out there being imposed upon you. It's a very much a going within process and the ability to listen to yourself.
That's fascinating. I'm really curious, how does one reach this optimal flow, this attunement that you mentioned, especially because if you're attuning to yourself, I have to imagine not everyone is aware of what that is like.
Yes, we can use the analogy of a machine. We all know that efficiency and resistance are opposites. In other words, if there's resistance, there's friction, there's tension. Or think about it in terms of the saying, you can cut it with a knife. Sometimes you walk into a room and there's just that tension, everything is solid. Or we know in our own interpersonal relationships, even very close ones, there are some days when everything just flows and it's very loving and there's a connection there. And then other times there's resistance and there's hostility, or there might be enmity, or there might be just a misunderstanding. So we all have that knowledge and that awareness that sometimes your life flows. You have great days. I call them blue sky days. You also have other days when life just doesn't flow, where there's resistance, where there's tension, where whatever you try to do doesn't work. So we've got that experience, but what most of us don't understand is that it is a skill set. So my goal is to have as many flowing days and experiences as possible, rather than believing that that's just life. Yeah, some days it's sunny and some days it's cloudy. No, I believe that it is a skill, and I wanted to master that skill, so I needed to understand it. So dial tuning is that ability to know, well, what are the dials for us to have this three-way conversation. It doesn't just happen without a lot of technology, and you need to get it all right. You need to have a clear picture, you need clear reception for our voices, and we need to know the time. So we're getting quite good at using technology and knowing how to, you get in your car, for example, once you learn how to drive, it all becomes subliminal. You don't even know what you're doing, how many times you're putting the blinkers on, putting your foot on the brake as soon as you see the lights in front of you. But to learn any skill, learning how to type, learning how to drive, learning anything is quite difficult until we master that skill. One of the things that I am very passionate about is that in our whole education system, we never have a course called Life 101. You have never sat down anywhere with anybody who has said, this is how life works. These are the mechanics. This is the metaphysics. These are the road rules of life on planet Earth. Learn them, and you will have a successful and a happy life. So for me, the ability to flow is learning all of those road rules, driving well. It's being accomplished at living your life well. And look, if you think about it, a lot of people believe that life is a bitch, or that life's hard, or that life doesn't work, or that you have to suffer, or that you have to work really hard to achieve anything, as opposed to this, what I'm calling grace, simplicity, elegance, and learning to have fun, enjoying life.
I wonder, what are 3 steps that you took towards living your life in this flow state?
Let's go to Flying Upstream. What a great name, because probably start with a little story, which is there's two fish swimming past each other early one morning in a beautiful sea. And one fish says to the other fish, water's good today. And the other fish says, what water? We all live within a paradigm. We all live within a belief system. We Western people live within what is called the Judeo-Christian system, the Western paradigm. If we look at the woke world today, there's a lot of effort to change the paradigm that we live within. So a paradigm is a set of beliefs within which we live. We call it normal reality. You're saying, in terms of your show of Flying Upstream, is that we have a choice. And the first choice is, am I just going to go along with it? Am I going to accept that everything they give to me? Am I going to believe everything? Am I just going to be a nice little clone? Or I believe very strongly that a lot of people go, doesn't really feel quite right to me inwardly, but to buck the system, to go against the flow, to question the paradigm takes a lot of courage, takes a lot of guts. One of my favorite sayings is, have the guts to join the dots. In other words, don't just accept the false narrative, particularly today. The false narrative that abounds today is more pronounced than ever, because once again, we have that technology whereby it can be disseminated so much easier than in the old days where there was no technology. You really only had word of mouth. The first step, I think, is not necessarily to reject everything, but at least to question it. In other words, don't just accept everything. Start opening your mind and really questioning your own set of beliefs. Does this really feel right to me? The second thing is then to examine your set of beliefs, to understand what is your fundamental beliefs about the way reality works. We can look at the example of once upon a time, people believed that the world was flat, that the sun revolved around the earth, that the earth was the center of the universe, etc. So the first one, as I said, is don't just accept. 2, really understand what your beliefs are. And then 3, design your own reality. So I think the third step and the most important step is to realize that you do create your own reality. And one of the main building blocks of doing that is your beliefs. This is why beliefs are so important, because your perception, your filters are dictated by your beliefs. We all have cognitive bias. We all seek. An algorithm is just doing what human beings have done forever, which is we choose things, information, data, music that reinforce what we already believe. But unfortunately, it becomes a funnel which makes us narrower and narrower. So they're the three things. Don't accept everything, really examine your own beliefs, and then start to design, create your own reality.
Those are such great tips. I really appreciate that what you're saying is not just blindly accept something, but actually pause, take a moment, really turn inward and figure it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the whole key is not necessarily reject. You don't want to be a rebel for a rebel's sake. That's what we've got now in terms of polarization. That's still not thinking either. That's not really intelligent. But it's not just accepting, because if you think about it, we are constantly, from the moment we are born, bombarded by this paradigm. Your parents might like to call it training, the state might like to call it education, but at the end of the day, it's brainwashing. It is forcing you into a mold, because then, as a populace, you are easier to control. You're a good little toy soldier. What's the great American dream? Go to school, get a job, get married. It's a very tight ship. And you've got to basically play along with that. Look at the cancel culture today. If you disagree with the narrative, you just get turned off. So there's a lot of power out there, and there has always been a lot of power out there to keep us docile, to keep us limited. The unfortunate thing is that turns off our creativity, turns off our creative power, because creativity is the ability to see something that hasn't been seen before. A creative thought is a new thought. It's not a thought that you're regurgitating, that you've read, or that has been narrated to you. I believe that we all have that creativity within us, but if you're not accessing it, if you're not using it all the time, it's very difficult to enjoy life, because somehow or other that creativity is connected to joy, to enthusiasm, to delight. There's nothing more delightful than being creative. It's a wonder. Whereas if you're just repeating, regurgitating, it's not very interesting.
What do you think is one limiting belief that a lot of us grow up with that shut down that creativity and take us off the ability to be in that flow state and to be able to listen to ourselves and be able to do what you do to live your life with as much happiness as possible?
Very simple, but again, and all these things have a dialectic. So it's basically not good enough. Okay. So we all have a not good enough, but that's generic. That's black and gold. That doesn't help you. Okay. So you need to find what is your not good enough. Now, for example, I spent many years doing counseling and working on developing this modality that I call tuning. And we all know about affirmations, changing our lives. None of this is going to work if you do not know exactly. I'm talking about linguistically knowing exactly what is my not good enough. When you find it, it's like this, aha, because you will know that you have said that phrase to yourself absolutely millions of times, and it doesn't change. Now, most psychotherapists believe it's all done by four. In other words, you've created this my not good enough by four, and then you just keep repeating it. You just keep saying it. For example, it could be, I'm not pretty enough, or I'm not smart enough, but you need to know exactly what it is. It's no good just saying I'm not good enough, but we all know that feeling of not good enough. We all know if someone's watching us, or if we do something, it's this gut feeling. Now, when you allow that feeling of not good enough to dominate, it just turns everything off. It's this huge blanket of rain, so to speak, that it's very oppressive. It just turns off all this creativity, turns off the joy. And basically, that feeling of not good enough comes from what I'm saying is this paradigm, the Judeo Christian paradigm of original sin. Because in this society, and in most religions, the basic story is that you are here to suffer, to earn salvation, to arrive at some heaven in another place, in another time, but you need to go through this, that you are born in original sin and that we're flawed, basically, that the human being is a flawed being, that you need to work your way out of this thing that's wrong with you. When you really understand that, you can see how insidious it is. How can you respect yourself? How can you honor yourself? How can you allow yourself to fly upstream and flow if you basically really and truly believe that you are flawed? Now, a lot of listeners might go, yeah, but I don't really believe all that shit. You do. You do, because it's been drummed into you on some level. You don't need to be a Christian. You don't need to be even religious. You don't need to go to church. You might say, look, I haven't been brought up with it. It doesn't matter. It's a paradigm. It's like the fish in water. It's what we believe. It's the way the whole system has been set up. And so the second part of that, which is really important as well, is that life becomes a means to an end, to another end, even if it is in this world, even if you go, I will be happy when, I will be okay when. And again, for each one of us, that's completely different. I'll be okay when I find the right partner. I will be okay when I get that job. I will be wealthy enough when I've got X dollars, or when I get the house on the hill, whatever it is. So it's a very insidious thought process that gets in there. And so it's always the now is not good enough. I am not good enough. You need to turn all of that around and go, I am good enough. Now is good enough. And now is all you really have. The power of change, the power to create, is only in the now. You can't change the past. You can't change the future. If you want to change yourself and you want to heal yourself, you must do that from the plane of being. And this is the other part of what has really happened, is that we have become human doings as opposed to human beings. So we're not being ourselves. We're not contacting that inner divine essence of ourselves. We're always doing, we're always going, because why? Because we need to get to that point where everything is going to be okay, right? If there's something wrong with you, you need to do something to fix it. The whole of Madison Avenue, the whole of advertising, the whole of influencing, the whole of social media, everything is designed around this premise. You buy this product and you will be okay. You reach this stage and you will be okay. You look like me and you will be okay. Has to be based upon the premise, the feeling of not being good enough. Otherwise, why would I want to buy the stuff? Wouldn't. But the problem is nothing works. So you need more and you need more and you need more. So another one of my favorite sayings is more is never enough.
Adrian, I'm curious to know more about what your offering is. So you mentioned that you have this philosophy called LifeWorks and you've got Tao tuning. How are you helping others find happiness and find their ideal flow in life?
I'm retired and now I am an author. Probably to go back to the beginning, my original goal, and in your terminology, when I wanted to fly upstream and I realized I don't want to go with the crowd, I realized that it was easy to be a capitalist and it was easy to be a mystic. I decided that I wanted to be a capitalistic mystic or a mystical capitalist. In other words, I wanted to find and design a spirituality that was pragmatic and practical and worked. Otherwise, I thought, what's the point? So I devoted my life to finding out, how does life work? Because we're never taught that. They've got to be a methodology, or because when you look at the universe, whether you look at the stars, whether you look at nature, whether you look at the ecosystem, apart from us, apart from humanity, life works pretty well. You don't see stars falling out of the sky. I was listening to a great old Crosby, Stills and Nash song the other day. It just came up on my Sonos, and it was, "This old earth keeps spinning round. It's a wonder tall trees don't keep falling down." And if you think about it, how does a tree just stand there? We're on this globe. Why don't we all just spin off? And we don't, because life works. The universe works. That's why we call it a cosmos. It's not a chaos. Stars don't fall out of the sky where things don't all of a sudden go wrong. Life follows certain rules and it works. But we, humanity, somehow insist on trying to go against all that. We think that we can cheat. We think that we can break all the rules and get away with it and it'll be all right. It won't. You just won't be happy. You won't be healthy. And so you're going to have a fairly traumatic and dramatic life. Once you go with the flow and attune yourself, and this is again where the attunement process comes in, that you're not just attuning to your inner being, but you're not attuning to this artificially imposed set of laws. You are attuning to natural law, to cosmic law. And it's like anything. You turn the tap on, the water flows. Turn the light on, turn the switch on, the electricity flows. So there's nothing mystical or far-fetched about that. It's very simple processes. You turn your car on, you put your foot on the accelerator, the car goes. So there's always a switch pretty much to make anything flow, and there will always be resistances which stop the flow. To come back to the answer to your question, in my life, it went through many stages. I started off with actually the first vegetarian restaurant in Australia, and I wanted to learn how to work with people in a harmonious way. And eventually that led to me building many businesses and being a management consultant on how to run businesses on spiritual principles, because I believe that one of the most important ways that we are creative is via business. Business is a fantastic way to express yourself, to be creative, but it needs to be in a holistic way. You need to create a culture within which people can express themselves. And so part of my business philosophy was that culture precedes performance. In other words, you've got to set the culture right within a business for people to be free, to experiment, to create, to be themselves, and then also to communicate in a harmonious and loving way, so that there was a lot of joy, a lot of happiness, and a lot of fun, as opposed to the normal business principle, which is sit down, shut up, and do what you're told. I also spent many years counseling and consulting, but now I'm an author, I'm a philosopher, and I am writing, I believe, for the future of the way that humanity will live. I believe that humanity is just about to go through a massive paradigm shift. I don't believe the elite is going to win. I don't believe we're going to end up in a dystopian future. I actually 100% believe that we're going to go through a wonderful chrysalis, like a butterfly, and emerge into a very spiritual flying upstream stage where basically humanity will come along that path. And so I am writing what I believe are the road rules or the manifesto, the way in which the individual can make this transition or can learn to fly upstream or can learn to fly. All these words mean basically the same thing. And so that's how I hope to help people. And that's why I'm doing these podcasts, because obviously you can write a book, but if you don't get it out there and nobody reads it, but it's also not that important to me. As I said, I'm writing for about 100 years down the track.
This is so beautiful. What would you say to someone who's struggling with going within?
Look, in a very practical way, I think the most important thing is to stop. Okay? Because momentum is a very real thing. If something's moving, it's very hard to stop it. Habits are very hard to stop, particularly mental. One of the most important things is you really got to watch your mind. But we need to start simple, so we're not going to go that far. But the habitual thinking, the habitual behavior, if you can just stop, and by stopping means that seek beauty, something. I'm sitting here, the sun is just about to rise. I can feel it, I can sense it coming in, it's getting dawn. I seek as many moments as I can during my day of beauty. Okay, now that might be a loved one, it might be a pet, it might be a flower, might be a sunrise. It doesn't really matter what it is for you. So humanity is very good at excusing, justifying, exonerating. Oh, yeah, but that's not going to work for me. I'm special and my trauma is more important. So make it very simple. And the simplest thing to do is just to stop and to find meaning visually, perceptually, maybe nice piece of music, whatever, just to stop. Look, I haven't say it could be that ubiquitous cup of coffee in the morning. Just stop and enjoy it, because it's a very simple process. If you think about it, joy arises spontaneously when you relax, when you breathe deeply. I believe that joy is like this fountain. You can't really turn it on. It will arise spontaneously from within you. When you're on your path, when you're on the flow, this flow erupts inside of you in joy. And it's a very pure feeling, because happiness can be contingent upon achieving something. I'll be happy when, and happiness will come and go. But if you have the ability to cultivate flow and to allow this joy to arise spontaneously, that joy will heal you much faster, much better than any medicine or any methodology, because joy will actually wash away the trauma, the pain. At the end of the day, all pain is a separation from the reality of yourself and the reality of life. And the reason why I say to people, seek out beauty, is because, again, going back to the paradigm of life is hard, it's all become very miserable. And we're just not living enjoyable lives anymore, so you've got to seek it out. You've got to find it. Where's the joy? What can I do today? That I think people on top of their to-do list should have every day. Where am I going to find joy today? What am I going to consciously do? What am I going to consciously, and it might be go for a little walk in the park, or play with your child for a couple of more minutes, or whatever it is. These can be very simple, tangible, realistic things that don't need to be spiritual. They don't need to be religious. They don't need to be complicated methodologies. I have spent my whole life really honing this. It comes back to this. Do you really believe ultimately at your core that you are divine? It is the way, it is the path, it is the truth. Even if you don't want to use the word divinity, then just use the word humanity, because we're becoming dehumanized. This is part of the AI elite woke agenda. It is to rob us of our humanity, of our individuality, of our uniqueness. So basically, that's the whole thing of being an AI. You just become a clone. You just become like this automaton that's very easy to control, and you just become a serf, SERF, in a feudal system. That's the goal. So it's very important, going back to honoring yourself. So what I do is, if I see, and I have a beautiful 10-acre garden that is in absolute full blossom now because it's early spring. I've got this absolutely beautiful buddleia at the moment that has this magnificent honey smell. So I'll stand right inside it and let the flowers completely immerse myself, and then breathe in really slowly, counting to 10, and take that scent right in, because that will give you joy. That will heal you more than any pill. Again, this goes back to Zen. The whole process of Zen is focus on what you are doing, pay attention, give it your all. In other words, put your love, put your being, put everything into it that you are doing. You will do it well. You will be successful, and you won't need to think about the result or the consequence or where you're going. But if you're focused on, oh, I am doing this in order to, okay, I'm doing this podcast in order to become a successful author and I want to sell millions of books, that's not going to work, right? The reason that you just said that you feel that I'm talking to you is because I am talking from me. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to tune into you both and answer your questions as honestly as I can from my heart, from my soul, from my being, but from what I've learned and studied and put together. But every podcast is different. Every question is different. So if you are totally focused and there, then that's where the magic, the flow comes from. The flow comes from being in the moment. If you're in the past or in the future or distracted or want to be somewhere else where the grass is always greener, then the flow can't exist. The flow can only come from what I call being now. And being now is the intersection of time and space. I need to be totally in this present moment, focused on what is happening, and then the flow, like the joy, arises spontaneously.
Thank you so much, Adrian. We're just about ready to wrap it up. One last question for you. We are curious to know, what was the defining moment for you when you decided to fly upstream?
Look, all I know is that I was extremely young. I think there are two parts to that question, which I tried to answer before, which is the first is the realization that going with the crowd doesn't work for you. And I'm not saying this is necessarily wrong or that's anything wrong. It's just not right for you. And that realization can either come slowly or quickly, or it can just be there. For me, it was always there. And I think that as a young child, you don't really realize that you're different. The second thing that happens is that as a very young child, that difference is actually quite painful because you want to fit in. You want to be part of the group. You want to fit in with the peers. And so we all, meaning the people who feel their difference acutely, want to get rid of it. We see it as a liability. I would go so far as to say we actually hate it because you just want to be accepted. And you know that the way you think, and for example, one of the things that my mother used to say to me the most was, for someone who's supposed to be so intelligent, I don't know how you can be so stupid, because I would be saying the things that I'm saying now when I was like 5 years old. I could always see things through this alternative lens. And this was the alternative world, the new age, all of that stuff. We're talking about a long, long time ago. To come back to your question, you have to get the courage to go, no, I'm not going to go that way. I am going to fly upstream. I am going to be honor myself, listen to my own calling. I can't really answer you as to when that happened. I don't think it happened in like an instant, but I know that as a very young child, I really didn't have a choice. I felt so uncomfortable trying to fit in. And I honestly did. I looked at all of my parents' friends and thought, okay, I'm looking for, not that I wanted to be critical, I was just looking for a role model. I was just looking for somebody's attitude to life that I could go, that works for me, but I never found it. And the more indoctrination, the more as you grow, particularly when you become an adolescent and you're really learning about the world, I'm just going, wow, this is all so wrong. I guess to make the decision to create a whole new philosophy, that's another step again, because one is to go, okay, I just don't fit in. I'm just going to do my own thing. That wasn't enough for me. You asked me before about helping people. I really had to consecrate myself to go, I need to work this all out. I know that I can work this all out. I'm a pretty intelligent person, and I had this ability. I always wanted to know how things work. And then I decided I want to know how life works, and I want to create a totally new way of being. I cannot answer as to a defining moment that happened in. I guess I learned to start honoring myself more and listening and obeying to who I am. So that voice, and this could be the second part to the question you asked me before about what can people do. Trust yourself. Listen to your own inner voice, honor it, trust it, but obey it. And I like to say, how many times, I call it my intuition, how many times does your intuition say to you, you better take an umbrella? And you look out and you go, it's not going to rain, it's a beautiful day, and then it rains. You know, how many times do we not listen to our intuition? How many times do we not obey? How many times do we go, oh, that's stupid? And so you think about it. If you've got a very good friend and you don't listen to them, or someone doesn't listen to you, you stop talking to them. You stop giving them your advice, correct? So your intuition is exactly the same. Unless you act on it, unless you listen to it, unless you obey it, it just stops, because you're cutting off the flow again of this communication. So not only stop and look for the beauty, but listen really acutely to that inner voice within that tells you, because it has all the answers. It knows everything. It will tell you everything you need to know. But it's not just listening, you must obey. So it says take the umbrella, take the umbrella. So probably to finish, my goal is that every day and every moment of every day, I want to be a better version of myself. Okay. So we know about personal best in terms of sports, whatever it is, run faster, swim faster. But we can also have a personal best in terms of our, again, whatever word you want to use, spiritual, psychic, but inner being, who we are. And that has nothing to do with comparing yourself with anybody else. It's not being better than somebody else. It's not being holier than thou. It's not being more spiritual, or I'm more on the path, or whatever. It just means that I want to express my inner being more fully, more wholly, more compassionately, more lovingly, just more authentically in this moment than I have before. And therefore, I am on a continual path of progressive perfection, of becoming more of who I am. And to me, that's what evolution is all about. We just all need to become more of who we are, not somebody else, not an influencer, not according to something else. And that to me is the whole beauty of life. Think about it. We are all unique. It's just unbelievable. And when you really treasure and appreciate the sacredness and the sanctity of that uniqueness, I don't think you really need anything else, because that's it, isn't it?
It has been absolutely amazing having you on. And for anyone listening, if you want to go grab Adrian's books and be on the lookout for the new book, you can find them on his website, adrianemery.com. Adrian, thank you so much for being our guest.
And thank you for giving me the opportunity to spread a little light. That's all we can do. To me, it's like a seesaw. As more of us go over to the other side, it's the 100th monkey.
Free spirits, thank you so much for being in tune with another episode of the Flying Upstream podcast. Until next time.
All right, free spirits, that's all the time we have for today on Flying Upstream.
We hope this episode sparked your curiosity and ignited a desire to explore the extraordinary paths less traveled.
Even when the current feels strong, a whole world of possibilities awaits.
We'll see you next time on the other side of mainstream.
So keep questioning, keep challenging, and most importantly, keep flying upstream.